Anything exciting going on in your world?
Other than recording from a closet?
No, the closet is quite amazing.
If it helps, right?
You sound great, so I
Well,
imagine
that's
they're going
good.
to tell me to go into a closet next time, which will be great. I'll be really excited about that. Hey everyone, this is BizDev. Welcome back. This is a podcast about startups, business development, and culture. I am David Baxter. I'm the Chief Pixel at Big Pixel. I am joined, as always, by Gary Voigt. Hello, Gary.
Hello, I am the head pixel crafter at Big Pixel.
Which means you make pretty things. Well, I should. That's selling you short. You do more than just pretty things.
Design stuff.
Design stuff, yes. So today we're going to jump into Facebook. No Apple. This is a no Apple podcast. So no bringing it up. This is the last time. No more.
Just the other $1 trillion software company.
Well, there's several now. There's
Yeah,
several $1 trillion companies. It's not just have you ever heard that? It's an investment term, FANG.
No. What is
Facebook, Apple, is it
Netflix?
and
Google?
And Google. Is it Facebook? Is it Netflix? That doesn't sound right.
Who else
But
that starts with an N would be that big?
I know Microsoft is in there, but that's wrong. But it's
Netscape.
such a strange acronym. It's a weird. I'm going to do some Google foo to pull that off and make that sound better.
Is it basically just labeling all the biggest players in Silicon Valley?
It is. It is right. Facebook,
Empire.
Facebook, Amazon, Netflix, and Google. FANG. It's interesting that Microsoft is not in that, but that is kind of the that's kind of the term that they use for the big stock guys, which I just think is weird.
The
It's
titans
kind of
of tech.
Yeah, but that's not even all the titans. I mean, Microsoft has got to be bigger than Netflix by a long shot. I don't know. It just sounds good. It's kind of like when Congress makes these insane bill names just so they can have a fun acronym. I've always thought that was fun. Anyway, speaking of Facebook, they've been in the news recently. The Wall Street Journal did a big old expose. Is that the right term for that? Where they just basically said they're a bunch of liars. I think that's the way to sum that up.
Basically, yeah, they were doing investigations for a long time and hit like 4 major things that they were looking into. And yeah, I guess through the help of some unknown sources inside Facebook and some actual company documentation, they found a lot of stuff that's not too bright and shiny for Facebook. And Facebook's been on the defensive ever since.
Yeah, so that's where I've seen it is all the response articles to it, and Facebook, of course, saying, well, all of this was totally wrong, and they're mischaracterizing who we are. And I think the problem with Facebook, generally speaking, is that no one believes anything that comes out of their mouth.
And it's definitely their fault for that.
Yeah, I think they have been just blatant. And this is where a lot of the expose is that they put profit above all else. And they've shown that time and again. They've had so many privacy scandals. The news stuff, the whole election brouhaha and vaccine misinformation, all of this stuff, Facebook profits on tremendously. It was something like 30 billion in profits just last year, which is mind-boggling.
And it seems like the number one driver for mass disinformation campaigns. I'm not saying all of the information on Facebook is disinformation,
sure,
but it is definitely the biggest vehicle to push that type of stuff. You know what I mean? And not just here in the US, it's been used around the globe as a psychological weapon for spreading misinformation. And it's one thing to point out these flaws when they're uncovered. But it's another thing for Facebook to say oh yeah, no, we're totally going to fix that. By the way, we're not doing anything to fix it because
they've never actually fixed
it. The more money we make off of it.
Well, and one of the things I thought was interesting was that outside of the US and English in particular, English language, they're even worse because they say they can't get the resources to moderate other languages, which when you make 30 billion in profit, that's kind of a weak argument.
Yeah, that
But
was one of the key points in the Wall Street Journal. They're blaming the lack of employees that speak fluent native languages to the countries that have, the worst spread of misinformation.
so yeah, so
And
the impact is that you're in other countries with other languages, the misinformation is just rampant. Like there's just no, it's like floodgates, and that's just wrong. I just,
yeah,
if you can't do it, then you shouldn't be in that country. I think you're too big to.
yeah, you should definitely have a division within that country full of people that speak that language. I mean, to quote the article from CNBC, it says for a company that's worth $1 trillion and generated $86 billion in revenue last year alone, almost $30 billion in pure profit. How do they have the inability to hire the right experts in the right places? Like that's
It's a
just a
fair
poor
question.
excuse.
It's a fair question. I think it spills into lots of their businesses. Like they come out with a lot of hardware nowadays. They've got the Quest, which is, I don't own a VR headset. It is on my list of fun toys to get someday, but it requires you to have a Facebook account. And they've got the Portal, which is a camera. Because they're so blatantly bad at privacy, I won't let any of those devices in my house. At least not yet. Maybe the Quest, maybe, because that's, I mean, anything with a camera like that Portal, no way. Absolutely no way. I don't trust them as far as I can throw them.
Yeah,
And so
that's
I'm not
brought up
letting that stuff in there.
every time they debut a new piece of hardware that's quote unquote connected to any of your other hardware.
Yeah, like their glasses that they just came out with, right? I mean, it's the same thing. We talked about that last week. It's like, no way. No way. Because I don't know what I mean, once you put it on your servers, I don't trust what you're going to do with it. So,
But we do know what they're going to do with it. They're going to find a way to use the data they collect to market that to entities that want the data for profit.
yeah, I mean, I think the worst case scenario that I can imagine, like if you have a portal and you're talking to grandma, and yeah, I've heard that the hardware is really good. It follows you and does a lot of the cool stuff that you want it to. But I can also imagine that they're also scanning what's in the background, and oh, that they like Ethan Allen furniture, or that's a Coca-Cola on there, and they're going to turn those into ads, and that scares me to death. Now, I'm not saying they are doing that, but there's nothing that would stop them from doing that, and that's just, it's underhanded. I just don't trust it. I think. What was that?
It's
Sorry,
funny
you want to
because
finish
it's
that
like,
out?
well, it just made me think of the scene from Minority Report. Famous
Which one?
scene where Tom Cruise is trying to escape, or he's trying to
Oh
elude
yeah,
being
yeah.
captured because he got blamed for something, and he's walking through what seems to be like an airport or
Mm-hmm,
some
mm-hmm,
sort of transit station, and every billboard is specifically targeting him based on his retina scan, and they're
mm-hmm.
using his name, they're telling him the products that he should buy and where they're located, and he's just looking around like everybody knows
Yeah,
exactly
and
where
no
I
one
am and
else
who
can
I
see it but
am.
him. Yeah.
Right.
That's, yeah, and we should talk sometime about the embodied internet, which is another Facebook thing. Well, it's not just Facebook, but it's the future, and I think it's really neat. Because it's
So do
not
you
just them.
think, and sorry to interrupt again, do you think Facebook's lack of transparency and like authenticity and just owning up to their problems it's definitely making it worse for them? But do you see a pattern there where companies, when they get to a point where they're so big, they just don't care anymore?
Well, I think they are in a unique class in that they are so big that they can afford. I mean, Facebook, especially in outside of the US, it is the internet for a lot of people.
Right.
Um, and Facebook is providing internet connections, and it's kind of like AOL if you're old. um, like when I was in high school, my parents had an AOL account, and you didn't get on the internet, you got on AOL and you went through their portal and you saw what they wanted you to see. And we've moved past that now you're on the internet, you go to open your browser and you go wherever you want. But in other countries, especially poorer countries, they go through Facebook, and that is their. So you can't. My point in saying that is you can't just avoid Facebook around the world. You cannot avoid them. They are too big, and so they can basically say, you know what, we don't care if oh, we might pay a fine here and there. I mean, when the government comes down on them, oh, you're going to pay us the biggest. They love saying this, the biggest fine ever levied by this such and such agency. And it's a rounding error for Facebook. It's a rounding error for all of them. Oh, you're going to make me pay $300 million. Well, okay, here's the check because I just made $3 billion for that. And I'm going to continue to write you those checks. I mean, that's how big these companies are. And when they get that large, it's really hard for the government to do anything about it, because they just consider those fines part of doing business. And that's not where we want to be. I think we could go on forever about that. But I think what it is, and I think over time, the problem that they're going to have is people don't trust them. They don't think they're authentic. That's the right word. And they don't think that they're going to treat their data with respect. You start doing that over a long enough period of time, it opens you up, and some startup or some other big giant is going to come in and really start nudging out their users. And I think their normal playbook would be to buy whatever competitor is coming up through the ranks. But now Congress is really pushing against that. So that will be harder in the future. And I think that's only good.
So in that scenario where they kind of wrote the playbook on how to steal user data and use that as an advertising tool. Mm-hmm. And then what they get in trouble for, the smaller companies kind of take note of that and then back off because they obviously don't have the kind of money to fight those lawsuits or whatever.
And so they come out as the better alternative because they value your data more than, and I think stealing data is probably too strong of a term. You're voluntarily giving up your data. You sign a thing when you sign up for Facebook that says we basically own all the stuff that you give us. So people are happy to give it to them.
Right. You say it's free, just sign here and they'll do it.
That's right.
Also, that's obviously it's a manipulation of sorts. I mean, they can say, it's in the fine print, but the whole reason, quote unquote, fine print exists is to protect from something that might not be so upfront and honest.
Well, one of the things I tell my kids, and I'm not claiming this quote, someone else said it, but if the product is free, then you are the product, right?
Yes.
So if you're not paying for it, that means you're giving them free stuff that they can then make money off of. And my kids don't understand that. I mean, even at almost 16 years old, that's not a concept. It's free, Dad. What's the problem? I'm like, you don't realize what you're giving up for that, quote, freeness. And I try to instill in them to be careful what you give away, your data and pictures and all of that, because in the end, especially when you're young and you do stupid stuff, that might come and bite you. And I don't want to wander down that train too far, but it is an adage that is worth keeping in mind. If it's free, then you are the product, and it's worth noting that, and you should pay attention. I want to transition a little bit here, go back to that authenticity thing that we were talking about, because I had a client yesterday. He was writing up some content for his site. And one of them, it was basically two options. He was saying, hey, which one do you prefer? And one was a list of features that this app does, what this client provides. And the other one was an opinion sentence that says, this is why we do it. This is who we are. It was an opinion. This is why this is the right thing to do.
Lending itself to add more value to the features.
I told him to go with the more opinionated piece. Right. And to me, it touches base with that authenticity thing that startups in particular really, really need to lean into. That is, there are so many apps and many of them have the same features, right? There's a million versions of, think of Salesforce, right? How many CRMs, how many apps, business apps are out there? Slack competitors, right? There's tons of them. And the thing that people really will choose one over the other. Now, obviously, certain features are required. That's not what I'm saying. But the opinionated, authentic, this is who we are. We're standing apart based on our story or our opinions on how X, Y, and Z should be done, really, I think, sets you apart. And I think that's something startups need to do more of. I think having that strong opinion, and I'm not talking about like politics or anything like that. I'm talking about why your product is built this way, and this is how you should use it, and this is why it will make your X, Y, and Z better, right? Does that make sense?
Absolutely. I feel like if a business startup or a product starts with we care about this thing, whether it's, tech or like project management or whatever niche it is, but we care about this and we would like to see it be, used this way. So we're going to offer these features that work together to give this experience that we find valuable, and we're not gonna, you know, throw in 50 other things because they're trendy with every other software. That core group of, like you said, the authentic version of what they wanted to create is definitely going to translate better to the people using it. It's going to make them feel like they're a part of something instead of just a consumer of something.
Yeah, agreed. And I think this trends well with where the question that will be asked is, well, how do I be authentic? How do I make my app or startup? This is true for tech startups and clothing and everything else in between. It's not just tech. Authenticity is everywhere. If you're making jeans, you need to stand on your principles that make your jeans better than anybody else. But one of the
And that
things,
actually, sorry to interrupt.
No, it's fine. Okay.
And that actually plays into, in the design world, your brand story. So the company that is authentic to what they're trying to create and cares about what they're creating, if they're able to communicate that to their consumers or users through their brand story to seem authentic and real, that's also how they communicate that authenticity rather than just, um, you know, showing you in the product itself.
So, I mean, this is a ladder, right? We're climbing the ladder. So a new startup, someone listening to us who's thinking about their idea, really wanting to make a go of it. How do they make themselves authentic? So, that's the end goal. So take one step back. You have a brand story. Okay, great. That is wonderful. Take another step back, and what do you get? You're at core values. And this is something that, okay, so let me back up and give a little backstory here. So I'm a member of a business group called C12, which is a round table of sorts. There's lots of different groups. Mine is that we call it, the one I'm in is C12. And one of the things I've learned the most about when joining with them years ago, was the need for core values, because that was something most new businesses just kind of glance right over. And those core values, man, they changed my way of thinking about business. And this is true for any kind of business. So if you want to be authentic, you need to think about your core values. And an easy way of saying a core value is, what is it that someone would be hired or fired for doing? So anything, if I fire someone, it's because they broke one of my core values. And it's as simple as that. And that's how powerful these should be. They should define every decision. You'll hear in a lot of business books and stuff, you'll hear about alignment. That is all about core values. When you are the founder of a company, you need to know who you are, why you're doing this, whatever this is. And then you need to codify that in a mission statement. I know it sounds cheesy in marketing 101, but I'm telling you, so many people skip over this. Do your mission statement, and then from that mission statement, jump into their core values. And once you define that why, authenticity is just going to flow right on out of you. And that's a really key part to any startup that's going on. If you really want to succeed, you're going to do it based on how real and how tangible your business appears compared to your competitors.
And I bet it takes some practice not to lose sight of that. It's easy to say, okay, I wanted to build this product. Oh yeah, I need core values. You need a mission statement. You write it down. You're like, sounds good from a marketing perspective. But it might not actually be true to who you are or to the business, like you said. So then you move forward. Things change. The environment you're working in might change. The people you're working with might change. They might have different ideas, and you might start going a different direction. If you don't refer back to those core values, the mission statement, and if they were not authentic to begin with, at that point, you've probably been lost already.
Yeah, and I promise you, your customers know it. I mean, that's the thing. If you're just moving on the waves or the wind or whatever analogy I'm coming up with, if you're just going with the flow, your customers are going to know it, and they're not going to appreciate it. They want to know you stand for something. If anything is true today, people stand for things, good, bad, ugly. And your business has to as well. If you don't stand for something, you're not going to succeed. I believe that from the core of my being. And that changed our business. We, for first few years, it was just me. And so I was just kind of doing whatever, right? The joke was, I'd do anything if you pay my bill rate, right? But you got to get past that. You've got to stand for something, and you've got to stick with that, so that no matter who is coming to work for you or who your clients are, you're going to evaluate them based on those core values. And every single person who works for you should know your core values, and they should align with those core values. If they don't, you need to get rid of them. It's that simple. And again, this all comes back to authenticity. If you want to be authentic, you have to know who you are, whatever that is. If you're big into environmentalism, great, then that's who you are. If you're not, then that's who you are. But take a stand one way or the other. You might be all about a cheap product rather than we're saving the planet. If you're saving the planet, you're going to be a more expensive product. Okay, great. Then this is why we're more expensive. It fits to our core values. If I'm the cheapest of the cheap, I don't care about the planet, generally speaking. I mean, that sounds horrible, but it's true.
And David is not speaking for Big Pixel as a company. David just speaking as an example.
That's fair. That's fair. We're just talking in generalities here, not us. We love the planet. Earth is our home. But it just is an example. If you're trying to be authentic, you probably are going to be on a more prestige brand. Not necessarily, but oftentimes it is. I shouldn't say that. That sounds wrong. No, that doesn't ring true.
There's also this also goes into when you're being authentic, and people do notice whether you think they do or not. And your customers, some are going to come and go, but you're going to keep a core group there that they're going to value you for being authentic. And this is a tangent not related to software or anything like that, but this is a lesson I learned growing up through skateboarding. Skateboarding started off
going off to the side.
Yeah, but just no, it's going to come back, and
we're going to get back. All right, I'm excited.
Skateboarding started off, no one cared about it, thought it was a joke. And then it generated a core group of people who really loved it. And they're the ones that actually built the industry. They're the ones that started making better products specifically for the people that wanted to use them. Then the market kind of notices. They're like, oh, they're selling skateboards. They're making this much money. Everybody starts producing skateboards. But all those companies were not skateboarders, did not care about skateboarding or how to use the skateboards. So they sold a lot of skateboards for a couple of months and then all went under because the core group, the core consumer knew that they weren't authentic. Now that was back in the 70s. This is the year 2021.
Back when you were 20 or 30?
Thank you for that. Appreciate that. You look older than me, by the way.
Oh, ouch. It hurts so bad. It's true. It's true, though.
I'm just saying the same core principle that drove the industry of skateboarding then drives it now. There are companies that try to hone in and take part of what now is, I guess, $1 billion industry. Bigger companies like Nike and Adidas. And when they first tried it, they were doing what you were saying. They were just going to build the product and sell it to that group. It didn't work. They tried. It failed. Until they actually got back to being authentically for that industry. In other words, hiring skateboarders to create things for skateboarders. So skateboarders recognize that it's actually a skateboarder doing something for skateboarding. Then they took off and then it worked. So totally different industry, but same core idea. It
still works.
If you're authentic and if you're true to your values and in some cases the brand or the industry, it shows through and you can capture that audience of people that appreciate that. Might not be everybody, but it's
if you're listening to this and you're playing the drinking game of a shot every time we say the word authentic, you'd be dead by now.
Yeah.
I think we've said that a few times today. But that's a good point. I mean, I'm not trying to take away from your point. I think it's a good example that this has nothing to do with tech, although tech absolutely. Facebook is a good example of when it doesn't work. I mean, no one thinks they're authentic, but they do make a great product, but you've got a lot of caveats when you use it. And people would prefer, I would bet, maybe I'm oversimplifying here. Grandmas and grandpas have no idea about any of these privacy things. So they're just along for the ride because someone at some point said you can connect to your high school friends, right?
They're also,
that's how Facebook got big.
They're also way too trusting in seeing what's being fed to them.
Yeah.
They don't understand that there's an actual algorithm sending information to their specific feed based on, a mathematical equation of what you've looked at or what they think you should look at, not just, oh, my friend is sharing this. So.
Yep. Which will change. I think that's one of the other big things that's happening is there's a lot of legal stuff happening to say, hey, these algorithms are not okay. I'm sure we'll talk about that more when they come back. when the laws start heating up is what I mean.
So to combat this bad press and negativity about Facebook, they're hiring an old CTO, and they're trying to turn their focus onto making new products instead of. Did you read that story?
Their story is going to be CTO. You're stupid. They basically are their defense is you're stupid, you're wrong, Wall Street Journal. We're not doing anything wrong. But what's interesting, if you read the fine print there, they don't actually combat each individual facts that came out in the expose.
No, they're not saying that they're wrong. They're just saying that's not what our intentions were.
Sure. And we'll do better, right? That's what they always say. Okay. So we're done with authenticity. I'm done being authentic, Gary. No more. Just kidding.
Speaking of authenticity. No, actually, let's stop.
We're going to stop because let's just transition to the mailbag. All right. So last week we asked people to send in questions and things about startups, business, whatever, and get answers from it.
So our question coming from Gary, totally other Gary, not me.
It's totally you.
Actually, yes, it's me. Okay.
That's what happens when you're a new podcast. But we'll get better.
It's a good question, though. All right. So asking you, do you see value in the new and expanding no-code or low-code tools that are coming out? And what type of businesses do you think benefit the most from these when they're starting out?
Okay. So it is a good question because you're seeing this all over the place. Examples of...
To give examples of like a low-code and no-code tools, things like Squarespace, Wix, but then to go a little bit further into what's called the low-code, I guess would be things like Webflow, and then combining that with other products like Zapier, Airtable, and similar to what WordPress did when they started, but then WordPress just became so big and overbearing that there's so many things you connect to it, and then all those connections require more and more expertise. So this is kind of like a step back to like trying to make digital products easier for someone to build without knowing all the coding languages. And
so
is that a help at first?
I want to take a step back.
Okay.
Because there's a lot of different definitions of code, low code and no code. Like what you're saying is absolutely true. There is Wix and there's Squarespace and there is Webflow and all of those. And that's to build websites. And that's, I would call that a low code version of a website. But these things, the new ones now are on a whole different level. I mean, you've got, so then the next step would be like Zapier or Zapier. I'm not even sure how you exactly say that, but we've used that in the past. It's a way to connect multiple things. That's kind of a low code thing that allows people to do simple things. Then you have things like Coda and
even things like Airtable.
Airtable. That's the
there's even design software now. Things like Spline, which is like a 3D. You can create and animate 3D objects in your browser without knowing anything about the 3D space or how to use 3D software.
Well, and so then there's even another step beyond that.
Just
You've got it now to the point where and some people ask us about this. Are we threatened by our core business of development? Are we threatened? Right. You've got things like Creatio and Appian and Mendix, which are basically you're starting to drag and drop and build code. And there's tons of these things. Appian, I think I just mentioned. There's tons of these guys. And they're now saying, hey, you can build a full-on mobile app without knowing any code. And so the question is that going to replace all custom software? Absolutely not. No, not anytime soon. Maybe someday, but that's not something we're threatened by or development is threatened by. But
someone's got to code the no-code products.
Well, that's true. But at the same time, if you're a new startup, now some of these things are not. I mean, some people also confuse low-code and no-code with cheap, and that's not true either. Some of these are pretty pricey. They're cheaper than custom development. But you're talking, some of these are $4,000 or $5,000. You're talking, some of them are like, I'm just looking here, OutSystem is anywhere from $4,000 to $10,000. Mendix is $2,000 to $6,000. You could start to, that has some cost. It's not like, oh, Wix, it's a free app. No, they're generally not. They're going to have some cost to them. So I don't want anybody to think that they're not. But that is way cheaper than a custom development. And custom development could easily be $50,000 to $100,000.
Now, what would you consider a product like Shopify? Because that seems, if you're looking to sell stuff online and you're not going through eBay or Facebook Marketplace and you actually want to set up a store, you have things like Squarespace, but Shopify seems to be the, end all be all of the best way to get that stuff out there.
Yeah, I would consider that not low code. That's just an e-commerce platform. You're not going to sell products with your own branding. Like you said, there is Etsy and the like. But with your own branding without an e-commerce solution. Those have been around forever. I think that's a side thing. E-commerce platform, they can start creeping into this because you can start to connect to shipping things and you can connect to tax things and payment things.
If you start with a template and then you build from there.
Yeah,
I mean, that's kind of you could stretch it.
Yeah, I think you could twist it, but they're talking about you need an app, right? I need an app for my business that my customers can do and see a customer portal and all of that, and I don't want to have to code that from scratch. You can do that somewhat now. And so if you're a startup or you're an existing business who has a budget of $10,000, let's say, to do an app, then these low code, no code, you can use them almost interchangeably. They're a great solution. I'm not going to say you should avoid them. What I am afraid of, though, is what you have to, at some point, you're going to outgrow them. That's really where it comes down to, is you're going to need something, because these are all cookie cutter things, right? You drag and drop. Oh, I need a map. Okay, cool. Here's a map. And I need to be able to do X, Y, and Z with the map. Okay, here, you can do that. But now I need to do A, B, and C. Oh, well, we don't do that. Okay, well, crud. Now what do I do? Now you're in custom development. And you can't just take what you built with them and just code on top of them. You've got to then start over from scratch, right? And then that money you spent on the low code environment is no longer useful because you have to build it from scratch. Now, you can probably have some pages done completely custom and some with the low code. I'm sure there's some intermixing there, but it becomes difficult or more difficult, is it not impossible.
Is it harder if you're doing custom code to work within the, I guess, limitations of, say, a connected low code app? You brought up a map. Let's say a product like Mapbox, where you see everywhere. Mm-hmm. Apple uses them. Everybody uses them as their go-to.
That would not be a low-code environment, Google. Just so you know.
So connecting that API to a page is not low-code at all. But if you wanted that map to do a custom thing, is it harder to work around the framework that you're given by Mapbox than it is to just
take a step back. If you're doing low code, what they're going to have is they're going to say, here's a map component, boom, and add tabs and add, pins and points and this, that, and the other. Okay. Right. They're going to have an interface that makes that really simple. That's the low code environment. Okay. And they're using Mapbox behind the scenes. They're using the Mapbox API behind the scenes to do it, to make it really simple, because that requires custom coding. Right. Okay. And that works great. So they're all using the Mapbox API or something like it. Google sometimes, but Google can get pricey. The difference is let's say I want to provide something that Appian or Creadio, or if I'm saying these right, if that they don't provide out of the box. I need something unique. Now you're in custom world, and you've got to figure out a way, how do I beef up this map without throwing out everything I did. And that's where it's tough. Well, like for example, maps are a good example because everyone understands it. But we had a client, it was a LMS, learning management system client, who wanted to have a map that showed all of their locations. Okay, great. That's easy. We can do that using a third-party tool, a low-code kind of thing. Well, but then I wanted to click on it and then interact with another system so that I could then give them information about our platform out separately from the map. The tool just flat out didn't do that. You couldn't have tool A talk to tool B without custom coding. Now we broke everything, right? Now we're in a custom environment, which is way more expensive. So that's a good example of outgrowing these things. So to answer the question without going on too long, is there a place for them? Absolutely. If you are a smaller business or you're just dabbling into a new area in your existing business, give them a shot. It's a few $1,000s to go live with an app that you could give out, and you can probably get 80% there. great. If there's a business behind that, or if your people really love it and they want more and more features, and you're running into the bounds of that system, then you've proven the idea enough to go to management or raise the money or whatever to build it for reals, right? With a custom development team. And then to me, you've proven out what you're doing. You might not ever run into those boundaries, and then you're in a great spot. But my guess is at some point, if you're going to find success in it, you're going to break their framework at some point, and custom will have to come in. But I think at the very least, you've said, I've proven my idea. It's worth investing in, which is something we're really big on. You do as cheaply as possible with any startup until you have to spend money. We often talk about, this could be a longer conversation than we need to have time for now, but we have the two-sided market thing, and we challenge everyone. And again, we should talk about that in a future episode, but two-sided market, we tell them, hey, you should do this without any code at all. Phone, Excel spreadsheets and phone calls, and go and see how far you can get. You've spent no money, you spent your time, and that's a great way of doing it. The next step to that would be a low code kind of thing. If that works and you still need more, then you need custom, right? It's ways to build in blocks. So hopefully that's
even
helpful.
with the low code tools, sometimes, like you said, if you're growing and you do have proof of concept for your idea, you're probably paying for the connections between these tools. And then the more you grow, that price is going to go up and up and up until you come to a point where it's like, well, I might as well just spend this money, if instead of spending this money yearly or monthly, just grab a chunk, build it from scratch, don't have to pay for it again for a while.
Yeah, I mean, that's another big difference is when you use these code and low code, whatever tools, you're paying forever, monthly usually. For, you can pay $2,000 a month forever. You never stop paying for it until you lose it. If that
you have two or three things connected to two different platforms, and then that turns into three different platforms, next thing you know, you're spending so much money monthly on subscriptions.
Mm-hmm. So when you custom build it, you own it. Typically, you should own it. Let me just put that out there. You should own your IP, and then you pay for it once and you're done. So that is a difference. Okay, I think that answers that. But again, if you have questions, if real questions from people who are listening, we have just finally gotten our podcast out on all the platforms. Very excited about that. We're on Apple and Stitcher and Google and Spotify and all those fun things. So hopefully we'll start to get more and more people listening. But if you have a question, again, please send them in. Not all of our questions should come from Gary, but they might in the future for a little short term. Email us at hello@thebigpixel.net. And just send us your question. And if it fits in, we will answer it here in a future episode. Okay. I believe.
Let's get off the heavy stuff.
Let's talk
about fun stuff. Fun stuff.
What if we talked about the fun stuff? Do you see what I did there? You like that?
Yes. Nice segue. And this is great because you never let me talk about design. You always take over the whole show. Business.
It's true. I'm an absolute egotist.
No,
Go ahead, Gary. Talk.
We're talking about what if.
Yes.
The Marvel animated series where, if you haven't seen it yet, it's on Disney Plus, but the concept is, what if one little thing in the timeline changed from this superhero story that you know so well? And then they explore tangents as if it were a different timeline.
So an example of that would be the first episode is instead of Steve Rogers as Captain America, Peggy Carter, his girlfriend, wife, depending on which movie, she gets the serum and becomes Captain Carter.
Yeah.
The super.
If the timeline of the Hydra infiltration just slightly shifted, the whole outcome would be different. Now, we were talking about it, and I brought up the animation, the quality of the animation, and just the overall artistry. The storylines are great, but watching this show is, for me, it's like staring at masterpieces nonstop for a half hour, just in awe of not just the art itself of the characters, but the little things like the ambient light, the way it reflects off certain objects in a different scene, how they're setting up the composition of these shots to tell the story even more than the words do. It's amazing. And
Gary,
what?
You are the only person who can take a Marvel show and turn it into a completely nerdy subject. Well done.
Yes, that's true.
Well,
and it's not just Marvel. Well, I guess you could say kind of Marvel too. No, do you remember the Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse when
Oh
Sony
yes,
put
I
that out,
loved
and it had
that.
the 9 or 10 different styles of animation that all meshed
Mm-hmm.
together in one perfect like thing? The technology that they were using and the way they changed the animation, they even had scenes where there would be different frame rates of animation to
Mm-hmm.
subtly show you the difference between an older style of animation versus a newer style of animation. So that kind of got
So
me really focused into the art side of animation and the technology they use today for it. And yeah, it's just super fun to watch those, and just you could watch once for the story and watch once again just for the visuals. It's amazing.
what's interesting, I start to see that. I think Into the Spider-Verse was the first time I'd really noticed us, and I'm sure that there were more before that, but it using all those different art styles and stuff. But I've started noticing it like the Spider-Man PlayStation game, the different skins you can get. Like you can get one of them that makes him flat, like he's a 2D character in
Right.
a 3D world. It's super cool. And
Yeah.
Fortnite does that a lot now. Where your guy is now looking 2-dimensional in a 3D world. I saw a really fun thing. I was at a family reunion this weekend, and they brought a Nintendo Switch, and they were playing Brawl. And one of the characters was from like a 1980s handheld game. I can't remember what he's called. I
Blocky, like
apologize.
pixelated looking.
He's like one of those old where it's like 2 frames per second. So his guy actually moves like that. Instead of being smooth, he's super janky on purpose. It is
So like his
super
head is
creative.
facing one direction or the other. There's no in
Yeah,
between.
yeah.
It's
And
either
when he
he's looking left or
moves,
looking right.
he goes his hands, like if he raised his hands over his head, it would do it in 3 frames rather than smooth 80 frames across, right?
Right,
It's
right.
super creative. I think what if I've only watched to the Doctor Strange episode. And if you haven't watched it, then you should pause it because I'm going to spoil something here. Um, but when I watched the first one, um, the Captain Carter one, I was like, oh, this is great. And it was very, very happy. It was a happy episode, right? It was cool and exciting and girl power and all of that neat stuff. I mean, Peggy Carter was very cool in the episode, but it's a
I
very
know where
happy
you're going.
story.
I know where you're going with this. Yeah.
And then the second one was like that too, where it was kind of, I'm trying to remember the second one. Oh, it was Black Panther is Star Lord. And if that wasn't the happiest go lucky, let's ride off into the sunset episode ever, I don't know what is. I mean, Thanos is a good guy now, and Yondu, the guy with the cool crazy arrow that shoots people in the heart, he's a good guy now. Everybody's a good guy because Black Panther convinced them they should all be good people. Again, it was a great episode. Don't get me wrong. Chadwick Boseman, it was the last time he was ever recorded as Black Panther. It's a great episode. And I was thinking to myself, gosh, is this just going to be all happy-go-lucky, look, the Marvel universe is rainbows and sunshine? And then I watched the Doctor Strange episode, and he basically becomes a demon and ends all
Yeah, it
of
leaves you.
the universe. It's
It
like,
leaves
whoa,
you.
this got dark.
It leaves you a little bit sad and depressed. I mean,
Yeah.
the underlying message is kind of positive, but the events that transpire for him to try to understand that is, it goes down some dark holes.
It's pretty dark, and it ends. I mean, it's not like he goes, oh, never mind, and everything gets better. He feels the weight of his decisions, and it ends because it's a what if, and I don't have to have a sequel. It ends with him in a prison all by himself, and everyone else is dead.
Okay, here's
Holy
my
cow.
hot take. This is
Okay,
why
hot
Marvel
take.
will always beat DC when it comes to their cinematic universe. Their storytelling connects with people on a different level than any of the DC ones.
Ooh, deep.
Okay.
Is that true? I have to ponder that a little bit.
Okay, I'm not talking about looking back to the comic books from back in the day
I'm
or the
thinking of
80s
like the
Superman
DC
movies. I'm talking the last 10, 15 years.
Sure. Yeah, I'm thinking of the Snyderverse, right? I need to ponder that. We might need to revisit this so I can give you my thoughts on the Snyderverse and his deep thinking. Because it's funny, I am a huge Marvel guy, but deep down, secretly, I'm just a Superman fanboy. So
I will say the first Wonder Woman that they came out with was good. That was really good.
Oh, it was amazing.
It gave me hope that anything from there was going to be better. And then Aquaman. And yeah.
Aquaman was a fun romp. Wonder Woman 2 was hot garbage. I liked Aquaman.
Aquaman was hilariously
Jason
bad.
Momoa is the guy every guy wants to be. He's just cool standing there. He doesn't need
No.
to do anything else except for flex and flow his hair around. And every dude wants to beat him.
He's the wannabe Rock underwater with hair. That's it.
Wait a minute. I want to be. You just described who I want to be. Hold on. So yeah, I totally get it. I like him. I think he's fun to watch, and I don't need him to do anything grand.
No, I'm sure he's a great guy.
He's a bro. Like you expect him to say bro after every sentence.
Yeah.
Or brah. Which
he was more, I guess, fun to watch in the, what was it? Not the Superman versus Batman. What was the one with the Superman where the Justice League?
Justice League. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. He was better in small doses like that.
Small doses. That's fair.
Yeah.
That's fair. All right. We have gone super long and we need to wrap this up, even though I enjoy talking about comic books.
Giving our editor lots of work to do this time.
Yes, a poor editor. Yes. Okay, so we're going to wrap this up. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. And hopefully you'll subscribe on all your favorite places and leave us a review. Only if it's positive, though. I don't want any trash talking. I'm just kidding. But we need to get the word out. So share, love it, review it, all that good stuff. And we will see you next week. Thank you, everybody.
Hit us up with any questions you have. What was the email address again?
hello@thebigpixel.net.
All right. See you later.
And on that
guys.
note, we're out. Bye-bye.